Hi, and welcome back to Koko Sleep, a podcast of original children's bedtime stories and meditations designed to make bedtime a dream. We're back in Sleepy Forest this evening with our favourite little koala and his kind, warm-hearted grandparents. It's been a while since we visited his cabin, and today we find Koko looking out wishing for rain. Can you guess why? Because when it rains, puddles appear, and Koko has some brand new Wellington boots that he wants to try out. So, before I tell you all about this special little outing that might involve splashing in puddles and dancing in the rain, jump into bed and lie down in your most comfy spot. Wriggle around a little bit more until you're ready and you can really relax. Take some deep breaths in and out. And now, imagine a bright, sunny afternoon in the forest, with the sun dappling through the trees, and a little koala sitting in the cabin window with his brand new boots at his side. This is Koko's Walk in the Rain by Gillian Rogerson. Deep in the heart of a faraway forest stood a cosy cabin. Inside the cabin lived a family of koalas. The youngest koala was called Koko. It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Sleepy Forest. Little Koko was staring out of the window of his home, and even though it was a beautiful day, he couldn't help letting out a small sigh. He loved sunny days and playing outside, but he didn't want it to be sunny all the time because he liked being out in the rain sometimes too. Koko loved splashing in puddles. His mum had bought him a new pair of Wellington Boots. They were bright red and had yellow spots on them. Koko couldn't wait to wear them outside. He'd been waiting for a rainy day for ages and ages. Well, at least 2 days anyway. It would have to rain sometime, wouldn't it? Koko sighed again, and then all of a sudden he had a marvellous idea. Perhaps he could wear his boots in the sunshine. Boots were good for all types of weather, weren't they? He had already tried his new boots on several times, and they were very comfy. And they made him feel very special too. Feeling much happier, Koko turned away from the window and went in search of his grandma to ask if he could wear his boots in the sunshine. He heard her singing in the kitchen. Listening to her lovely voice made Koko smile, and he hummed along to the song. Koko went into the kitchen and found his grandma dancing with his grandpa. They were always dancing together, and whenever Koko saw them dancing, his little heart filled with happiness. He didn't want to disturb them, so he stood by the door and watched them, smiling all the time. His grandparents saw Koko and waltzed over to him. They scooped him into their arms and danced with him around the kitchen. Koko chuckled and joined in with the singing. After a few dance-filled minutes, his grandparents came to a stop and gently stood Koko on the floor. They asked what his plans were for the day. Koko said, "I want to wear my new boots and go outside in them. I know it's not raining, but I really want to wear them. Can I, Grandma? Please?" "Of course you can," his grandma replied. "But why don't you wait for the rain to start? Wearing your new boots in the rain will be so much more fun." Koko pointed to the window and said, "It's never going to rain. Not today, anyway. Look how sunny it is." Grandma held up her paw. Ah, but it is going to rain today. I listened to the weather forecast earlier, and the weather bear said it was going to rain today and it would go on for hours. There could be thunder and lightning too. Won't that be exciting? Koko looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. He had learned to tell the time recently and was getting very good at it. He said, "Grandma, it's 1 o'clock now. What time will the rain start?" His grandma smiled fondly at Koko and said the rain would start when it was ready. Seeing the glum look on Koko's face, she reached out for his paw and took it in hers. She said, "Let's go outside and examine the sky. We'll search for clouds on the horizon. I'll use my magical powers too." Koko's eyes widened. "You have magical powers? I didn't know that. Did you know that, Grandpa?" His grandpa smiled and said everything about Grandma was magical to him. He took Koko's other paw, and the three of them went outside. They stood on the porch and looked at the sky. It was a beautiful blue, and there wasn't a single cloud in sight. Koko's grandma closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She slowly let it out and opened her eyes. She smiled down at Koko and said, "It is definitely going to rain. I can feel it in my fur, and I can smell it in the air. I think it will start in about 10 minutes. It will be light to begin with, but then there will be a downpour with some thunder and lightning." Koko noticed the confident look on Grandma's face, so he said, "I'll put my boots on and my raincoat. Is it okay if I play out in the garden in the rain?" Grandma smiled at Koko and her husband and asked if they wanted to go on a rainy walk through the forest together. They both said yes, and the three koalas went into the cabin to get ready for their walk. Koko pulled his new boots over his feet and put his raincoat on. His coat had a hood, so he pulled it over his head. He stood by the front door and waited patiently for his grandparents to get ready. It didn't take them long, and they soon had their raincoats and boots on too. Grandma remembered to take her rainbow umbrella with her. She said she loved feeling the rain on her face, but if it got too heavy, she would put her umbrella up. The three koalas left the family home and headed along the forest path. They'd only been walking for a short while when Koko pointed excitedly at the sky and said, "Look, there are some clouds up there. Are those rain clouds? I hope they are." Grandpa said, "They are rain clouds. You can see the silver-grey colour of them, and there are more appearing behind them." Koko grinned, and his toes wriggled happily inside his new boots. The three koalas walked on. More silver-grey clouds appeared and gathered together in the sky. They glided across the sky and moved in front of the sun. The forest turned a little darker. Koko skipped happily at his grandparents' side. He couldn't wait for the rain to begin. He didn't have to wait long. a single drop of rain fell from the clouds and landed on the tip of Koko's nose. He touched his nose to make sure he hadn't imagined the rain falling. As he did so, another raindrop landed on his paw. Koko cheered and said, "Yay, it's raining!" He did a happy jig in his new boots. The family stopped walking and turned their faces towards the grey sky. More raindrops fell and landed softly on the koala's upturned faces. Koko stuck his tongue out and caught a few drops on his tongue. They were warm. His grandparents chuckled when they saw what he was doing, and then they stuck their tongues out too and caught the rain. The rain dripped through the leaves of the trees. Drip, drop. It fell on the blackberry bushes. Drip, drop. It landed on the soft grass. Drip, drop. Each drip and drop sounded a gentle drumbeat. Koko held out his arms and listened to the sound of the rain falling onto the material of his raincoat. Drip, drop. He stuck his foot out and noticed how the raindrops sounded different when they fell onto his boot. Drip, drop. The rain grew heavier and created a soothing melody that echoed through Sleepy Forest. Some of the animals who had been playing outside looked at the grey clouds and hurried into their homes. Other animals peeped out of their windows, saw the rain, and came outside to play in it. The rain fell onto the forest path and made little puddles. A leaf floated free from a tree and drifted down into a puddle. A gentle breeze blew the leaf back and forth across the watery surface. Koko thought the leaf looked like a little boat sailing on a tiny ocean. Grandpa picked Koko up and took him over to a tree. Some of the larger leaves were shaped like bowls and filled with water. A little robin flew towards one of the water-filled leaves and sat next to it. She said hello to the koalas and took a refreshing drink from the leaf. Once she'd had enough, she said goodbye and flew away. More rain fell, and more puddles appeared on the ground. Grandpa grinned at Koko and said, "Shall we have a splash in the puddles?" "Yes, please," Koko replied with a grin that matched his grandpa's. His grandpa put Koko on the ground. There was a line of puddles in front of them, just waiting to be jumped into. Koko's grandparents told Koko to go first. He looked down at his boots. They were so very new and clean, but they had been made to jump into puddles. Koko bent his knees, and then he jumped into the nearest puddle. There was a huge, satisfying splash. The muddy water washed over his red and yellow boots. Koko jumped into the next puddle, and the next, and the next. Splash, splash, splash. It was so very satisfying and enormous fun. His grandparents jumped into the puddles too, and they laughed and laughed as the water went everywhere. Koko held his grandparents' paws, and they splashed in the puddles together, over and over again, until they finally stopped and decided they'd had enough splashing for the moment. The rain still fell, pitter-patter, over Sleepy Forest. Grandpa said the rain sounded like a drum, and it made him want to dance. Grandma smiled fondly at her husband and said he couldn't dance in the rain. "Why ever not?" he said cheerfully. "And you two can dance with me. Join in when you're ready." Grandma opened up the rainbow umbrella and asked Koko if he wanted to stand under it with her. He said he didn't want to just yet because he liked the sound of the rain landing on his hood. Koko's grandpa held his arms out wide and began to sing a joyful song. Koko swayed from side to side, and his grandma did too. Koko's grandpa twirled around on the spot and kicked his legs to the side. He jumped into a puddle and twirled around again. He kicked his legs out and sent drops of rain flying off in all directions. Still singing, he leapt out of the puddle and danced around a tree. He reached out for a huge rain-filled leaf and tipped it up. The rain fell like a shower over the singing, smiling koala, and it made Koko and his grandma laugh. Grandpa hopped and bopped through the falling rain and over to Koko. He picked him up and danced around the trees and bushes with him. Koko's grandma shook her head good-naturedly at the dancing duo. She moved towards them and joined in with the dancing. In and out of puddles they danced, shimmying and swaying. Around trees they boogied, and along the forest path they grooved. The koalas laughed so much that they had to stop dancing. They laughed some more until all of their laughter was out. More silvery grey clouds appeared in the sky and clustered together. The sky darkened some more, and the rain fell heavier. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter, pitter-patter. Grandma moved the umbrella so that all 3 koalas could shelter beneath it. The rain pitter-pattered on the material of the umbrella, and Koko felt very cosy beneath it. The family continued travelling through the rainy forest and came to an old wooden bridge. They walked onto the bridge and stopped in the middle of it. The koalas looked over the side at the swirling river below. The falling raindrops landed on the water and created tiny ripples that circled outwards and joined other ripples. Fallen leaves and twigs sailed down the river. The rain continued falling. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter, pitter-patter. It didn't show any signs of slowing down. Grandma looked at the sky and said the rain was going to get heavier, and she could sense that thunder and lightning were on the way too. She suggested they head into Sleepy Forest Village and go to the cafe there. The koalas had been to the cafe many times and knew how delicious the hot chocolate drinks were, especially when they were topped with freshly whipped cream and soft marshmallows. The family hastened across the rest of the bridge and towards the village. In very little time they reached the Sleepy Forest Cafe. Grandma stopped outside the door and gave her umbrella a good shake. Raindrops flew from it and onto the forest path. Grandpa opened the door of the cafe and told Koko to find a good place to sit. He asked Koko what he would like to drink. "Hot chocolate, please," the little koala replied. "With whipped cream and marshmallows?" his grandpa asked. Koko nodded eagerly. His grandma said she would have the same thing too. Grandpa went to the counter to order the drinks, and Grandma and Koko found a cosy corner table by the window. They settled down onto the soft seats. Koko and his grandma watched the raindrops running down the outside of the glass and looked at the puddles growing bigger on the ground. Grandpa brought 3 mugs of hot chocolate over and handed them out. The koalas sipped their delicious drinks and watched the rain falling over Sleepy Forest. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter, pitter-patter. Koko said he felt all warm and cosy inside the cafe. His grandparents said they did too. The sky grew even darker. Table lamps were switched on and cast cosy glows around the cafe. Grandma said the thunder was going to start. 2 seconds later, a rumble of thunder echoed through the sky. Koko gazed at his grandma in wonder. She really did have magical powers. The thunder rumbled again, and it was followed by a flash of lightning that zipped across the sky. Koko cupped his hands around his mug and took a small sip of the velvety hot chocolate. Outside, the rain pitter-pattered. The thunder rumbled. The lightning lit up the sky. Koko felt even more cosy and warm. The koalas continued watching the rainstorm whilst drinking their hot chocolate. Other customers in the cafe were looking out of the windows too, mesmerised by the soothing sights and sounds of the rain. The koalas continued to drink their hot chocolates. The rain pitter-pattered on the trees and the ground. The thunder rumbled some more. More flashes of light zigzagged across the sky. The koalas finished their drinks, and at the same time, the thunder and lightning stopped, and some of the grey clouds moved across the sky. The rain became lighter and lighter until it was no more than a drizzle. Sunbeams shone down through gaps in the clouds and moved smoothly over the freshly washed ground. Raindrops glistened like diamonds on the grass and leaves. A few birds began to sing. Koko asked his grandma if the rain had stopped. "Not quite," she replied. "And if my feelings are correct, there should be something beautiful appearing in the sky soon. Let's go outside and look for it." Grandpa took the mugs over to the counter and said thank you to the kangaroo who had made the lovely drinks. The koalas left the cafe and walked along the forest path a little. The rain was gently falling, and the sun peeped through gaps in the clouds. Grandma turned her face skyward and searched the sky. "There it is." She pointed towards some trees. "Koko, can you see it? The rainbow?" Koko turned his head and looked in the same direction that Grandma was looking in. A magnificent rainbow arched across the sky. It glistened and glimmered, and Koko wasn't sure if it was a normal rainbow or a magical one from another world. It was so beautiful and enchanting that he couldn't stop looking at it. The colours were bright and twinkled like stars in the sky. The koalas held paws and silently watched the rainbow. The rain slowly stopped falling. The grey clouds drifted away. The sun shone down brightly over Sleepy Forest. Koko looked up at his grandma and said, "I'm glad we came out for a rainy walk. I've had a lovely time." His grandma said she'd had a lovely time too, and perhaps it was time to head home. His parents would be back soon, and they would wonder where everyone had gone. "Will Will there be any more rain today, Grandma? Koko asked. She smiled at her little grandson and said, Yes, there will be more rain this evening. No thunder and lightning this time, though, just rain. And it will happen when you're tucked up, snug and cosy in your bed. Koko smiled at the soothing thought of listening to the rain as he fell asleep. The koalas walked along the forest path and jumped into every possible puddle they could find. Grandpa had another dance along the way, and Grandma and Koko joined him. The sun was warm on their backs, and the koalas took their raincoats off and carried them. Soon their little cosy cabin came into view. Koko's parents were sitting on the swinging bench on the porch. They waved to Koko and his grandparents. Koko ran over to his parents and bounded up the steps. Before he could say a word about his rainy walk, his mother said, You've been on a long walk in the forest, and you've jumped into many puddles. Wow, how did you know that? Koko asked. Have you got magical powers like Grandma? His mother pointed to his boots and replied, No, but I don't need magical powers to see how muddy your boots are. I'm so glad you got to wear them today. Have you had a fun time? Did you see the lightning and the rainbow? Koko said he had. He sat in between his parents and told them all about his wonderful walk in the rain with his grandparents. Later that night, Koko snuggled down in his bed. His grandma sat at his side and told him a story about an albatross who flew passengers all over the world. When she'd finished the story, she held up her paw to her ear, smiled at Koko, and said, Can I hear the rain? Koko listened. He smiled. He could hear the rain falling outside. Pitter-patter. There was a soothing sound. Pitter-patter. So very relaxing. Pitter-patter. Koko yawned and closed his eyes. Pitter-patter. The rain was a soft lullaby, a gentle melody of soothing sounds. Pitter-patter. Koko drifted into a deep, deep sleep. The rain continued to fall over Sleepy Forest. Pitter-patter, pitter-patter.